Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 8 of the anime series, Gangsta. And what can I say about this episode? It was just mesmerizing and beautiful and tantamount in that we're finally having a solidification of the ideas of what the four heads of this city, the four families, what that all amounts to, what the impetus probably was in forming them together. And it's all to do with the Twilights. It was to do with the Twilight hunts, and much as I referred to them in my previous episode discussion video, this is kind of like a renaissance of that era. You know, people are striking back against the Twilights once again, and it's becoming a real, preoccupation, a real threat. And what I really love about this episode, is we're getting this sense of an Underground Railroad kind of effect where, people are sneaking Twilights into this Club Bastard, and for their protection, they're trying to make sure they can quell the anti-Twilights, which is the term used in this episode. The people have been going after the Twilights and murdering them just, relentlessly. And so to see Nick and Warwick kind of employed to that use to try to take down the would-be assailants, the murderers of these Twilights, and spirit them away in a sense, give them a sense of protection and freedom. It's just awe-inspiring in a sense. These lower Twilights who, they're just like everyone else. They're human just like everyone else is. They have dreams and hopes and fears, and they're kind of living this life where they're being judged so unfairly. It's like a racist, sexist thing, but with powers, with abilities that in most cases, or at least in probably the majority of the cases of the Twilights being snuck into this club, they can't do anything about it. What are they supposed to do about it? So it was just absolutely amazing. And then to get an idea finally fleshed out about who the four heads are and what they represent, each of them, what section, each represents. I mean, you have, of course, Monroe. We've already been well familiar with him, but you have Loretta, who is part of, the Cristiano family, and she's not just the boss's daughter or the former boss's daughter. She's the boss of the Cristiano segment, which was like, whoa, mind-boggling. Of course, you have the Paul Klee Guild, which was, I was wondering if that was actually representative of one of the air quotes families. And of course, rounding it out, the Corsica family, which is interesting because, of course, there are still whispers about perhaps Corsica, being allied with maybe these anti-Twilights. And there was some discussion on my previous episode discussion video in the comments with a couple of you viewers about, certain factions. There are probably multiple factions for those who, haven't read the manga like myself. I haven't. But for those who aren't even that far ahead as far as what's going on with the anti-Twilight movements, suffice to say there are multiple movements that are anti-Twilight, and I'll leave it there. And what is happening in the last few episodes with the murders of these Twilights, I have to assume represents multiple of those facets. But the piece de resistance of this episode was absolutely the characterization of Alex. In flashbacks, much as we've had with, Nick and Warwick, we find out so much more about her. I mean, we open this episode with them repairing Constance's little gun shop, and I thought it was really interesting that we find out the old lady in that little sort of newsstand is actually her grandmother. That's funny. But it's interesting that because she's trying to get to know Alex a little bit, trying to befriend her a little bit, and there's even the boob grabbing, which, for this show to go untouched by that weird thing about, twice in this episode, Loretta and Constance both are like looking at her endowments, if you will, and just being rivaled by them. They're real and they're fabulous. All I want to know is boob grabbing like this as frequent in Japan? If not, why not? I'm moving there. But in any case, I digress. Of course, she has this stark realization, this flashback of a brother she left behind. And this, as soon as you saw her start trembling, I'm like, oh my God, we're going to have a flashback. This is going to be, much as Dr. Theo warned her, if your stress levels go high, you're going to experience those hallucinations again, a relapse. And she very much had one. She felt the presence of her pimp behind her once again. And in looking through, Google searches for images of the characters of this series and such, just because I'm becoming such a fan of it, I have actually seen this one little snip piece, a little image of Alex with arms, wrapped around her from behind. And I always got the impression that it was probably Nick who was like hugging her from behind, but I didn't know exactly what was going on. And in this episode, we have that scene play out very literally as she's trembling. Nick has caught wind of what's going on with her. And Warwick then sort of chastises himself later to say, I'm sorry, I, didn't keep my eye on you and everything. I didn't see what you were going through. But very much do we have Nick come over and from behind, straighten her hands as she's trying to get her sort of tranquilizer, medication, whatever it is. And this grounds her. It brings her back. It's kind of like if you watch Shokugeki no Souma, Souma going over to Megumi and slapping her hands and getting her back into the now instead of worrying about all these subsequent things that may or may not be worrisome. That's very much what this effect has for Alex. And I really felt like the bond between them, if there is a bond, there hasn't really been one representative throughout the course of the series thus far, much more so between Alex and Warwick, if anything, if nothing else. But I felt like there was a bond there between Nick and Alex, and it kind of leans toward that thing, that drive where I talked about, I don't think you should necessarily ship characters in this series, but if I were to, it would be Nick and Alex. I feel like there are so many multiple ways, layers upon layers, that these two characters could complement each other and could be there for each other and could be both awakening and broadening of horizons, but also complement whatever's holding each of them back. And, being able to be there for each other, being able to be the saving grace of each other. If no other characters in this series, those two would be the ones that I would, lay my dime on above all else. But as if that's not enough, there is going to be this so-called soiree, and this is the sort of backdrop, the sort of ruse, if you will, that is tentatively to hide the Underground Railroad effect of sneaking in these Twilights, these lower grade Twilights who are on the run and about to be slaughtered, to protect them and keep them safe. You have essentially Alex being moved into the position of singing. And this is something else in Google searches I've seen. I've seen her standing in front of a microphone, and there are, sort of bookended two images of Nick. One is him sort of being ambivalent and looking off to the side, and then you see her singing in the center, and then he's looking at her longingly. And that, again, falls in line with that. And I was wondering if we were going to get that in the series, and sure enough, we do. Because she has been overheard by Warwick humming, as sort of an answer to just everything else going on in her life. Music is the saving grace of Alex, to a degree, as it has been for me, as it has been for anyone who is a music lover. It is, as I have much described, music is the firelight within the depths of my soul, And so to hear her on stage and that piano melody playing and she's singing and just watching the way they've animated her expression, and that one point where they close in on her face and her eyes are closed, but then she opens them and you see the world and the universe in those eyes. The detachment that she usually has from everything that's been going on in her life, it's all awakened to her, and she's calling back on her brother once again. And I think this is very interestingly hallmarked by this new sort of hooded, character who has come to the city, and he's making his rounds, and he hears her singing, and he wants desperately to get into this club. And my one sole thought was, is this her brother, grown up? Does he recognize her voice? Because we see, as she's singing, she sung to him as a child, cradling him because they didn't have a mother. She mothered him. And it's just, I got misty-eyed with that, with that realization. And then, of course, as the song draws to a close and it's interspersed with all these, very much like the end sequences of The Godfather, or, sequences in Goodfellas and all these movies that deal with these kinds of topics, you have this melodic, beautiful melody playing, and you see all this action and lives being taken with Nick and Warwick, Nick mostly, you know, taking out the would-be Twilight assassins, and you know, Warwick spiriting on a mother and child Twilight and everything like that. It was just beautiful. It was like great cinema, you know, great, fantastic movies that, you know, test the span of time, that are still prevalent. This episode very much encompassed all of that within those moments. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. I came to adore Alex in so many ways, and adore Nicholas for his interactions with her. And I really hope, based on what the next episode's title is going to be, that we're going to see a reunion, and I hope it is a good one. I hope it is a positive one, and I hope there isn't tragedy waiting right around the next corner for Alex and her brother tentatively. But then again, we also see toward the end of this episode that you have Erica and the cat whose name escapes me, the little brother, or whatever he is, these two youths who are going around and killing Twilights, and doing so with some tremendous abilities, which again touchstones on the idea that there are multiple groups representative of people going after Twilights, and that is one particular of those facets that these two represent. And so it'll be interesting to see. It could be an episode full of parallels to come, where we're dealing with these two and an open war on Twilights that Nick and Warwick, probably more so Nick, is going to have to quell and come up against, while maybe faced alongside the backdrop of Alex reuniting with her brother, to have multiple layers of what siblings could mean. In any event, tremendous episode. Absolutely love and adore it, and I'm going to be watching it again just because the feels. I don't like using that term, but I definitely had them by the end of it. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 8 of Gangsta, if you've seen it, and if you enjoyed it as much as I did. If not, why not? Let me know in the comments below. Love having the conversation with you guys. We can agree to disagree. We can have the conversation. And so yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. And I'll catch you all later. Peace.